Welcome to Leading the Way podcast, where you'll learn neuroscience-backed ways to lead more effectively and have more fun at work with what you already have. Hey there, it's Chris from Leading the Way, and I'm so glad to have my awesome guest, Jessica, with me today. Thank you so much for being with us, Jessica.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I want to tell everyone else why I'm excited because they don't know you yet, but I know you a little bit. So I want to walk through all the awesome things that you're about. So Jessica's a pediatric occupational therapist for over 17 years and has now become a nervous systems coach. So she really knows what she's talking about. She's done this for a couple decades, and she takes her knowledge of the sensory and nervous system and she applies it to adults after she's already applied it to herself. So she also knows what she's doing there too. Her background gives her a unique perspective on not just the education of the nervous system, but how to apply that and make use of it. And as a mom, she knows what it's like to be stressed and feel the ups and downs of parenting and anxiety and overwhelm. And she's a therapist and a business owner, so she gets those things as well for those of you that are doing the same things. Now, she wants to deeply care for herself with her clients and her family, and she also knows that working with the nervous system can change everything, your awareness, your perspective, your strategy, and it leaves you feeling really empowered and strong. So the stress will always be there, right? We're always going to have stressors coming at us, but you won't be dragged down and sucked into patterns that just aren't serving you day by day. So, Jessica, that's why I'm so stoked to have you on.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So just diving into a few questions. I mean, right now there's always stressors coming in, like we just talked about. Right now, there's a bunch of different ones, right? It's summertime as we're recording this, so kids have out of school if you're a parent, and
Yes.
patterns are different, and that can be challenging.
Yes.
Figuring out routines, and it's different for the kiddos too. We have an election year going on, and all sorts of events around that. No matter who you're voting for or not voting for, there's
Mm-hmm.
pressures there, and we see things, and we can't necessarily control them, and that's challenging.
100%.
Uh, yeah, and the work world, we're in a stretched, kind of tight economy, and there's layoffs happening, and there's some uncertainty around there. So lots of stressors coming. What can we do about this from a central nervous system perspective? Like, what would you coach a client to
Yeah.
kind of get to a normal?
I love this. So absolutely all of the areas you mentioned are impacted by your nervous system. And I think that's really important to pull out first because I think often we tend to look at it like in one place, the one area where
Mm,
maybe things are the hardest. So sometimes for parents, you're really trying to figure out how to show up that way. And so you think, I'm just going to regulate my nervous system so I can be a better parent.
yeah.
But then as you learn more, you think, or what you realize is like, oh, that shows up when I'm in a meeting. That shows up when I'm on a sales call. That shows up when I'm at a barbecue and someone who does have a different political opinion to mine is saying something, right? It shows up everywhere. So
Mm,
people usually come to me with one thing in mind. Um, and I know that a few weeks in, there's going to be a broader spectrum of nervous system application. And so, what can you do in any of those areas? I think having awareness of your nervous system is the most important thing. Sometimes, as a business owner, this is hard to sell because you're supposed to be like, and then there is this amazing transformation. And the transformation of you will understand your anxiety better and see it coming sooner. It's like not super flashy, but that subtle shift is so impactful. So, what I mean when I say awareness of your nervous system, what's your fight response? What's your
mm.
flight response? What's your freeze response? How do you think? How do you behave? How do you feel when those responses are happening? Um, and then what tool can you grab for?
Yeah, it's so powerful. And, you know, you and I both know how the brain works, and a lot of listeners do, but just a super quick refresher is when we're in those response, heightened stress, adrenaline, cortisol's pumping, we're near
Yeah.
fight, flight, freeze, or we're stuck in the limbic system, we can't access the parts of our brain that do problem solving and
Yep.
collaboration and all those powerful things that would get us out.
Yeah.
Literally, it's like it's switched off, right? We can't access that at all.
I am so happy you brought that up because I don't know that everyone realizes that. So I call it flipping your lid, and I think I know that's from sort of trauma literature, but it
Yeah.
applies across the board. So for those of you who can see me, I know not everyone can. If you imagine your forearm as your brainstem, these are all of your automatic responses, your breathing rate, your body temperature, digestion, heart rate. It's the things that keep your brain and body going. Then the
Yeah.
palm of my hand is your limbic system. Those are
Mm.
your emotions, right? And then when I pull my fingers, sort of like closing into a fist, that's your thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex.
Mm.
When your brainstem is flooded, whether that's from stress, too much sensory stimulus, and this is a really unique threshold for each individual. So that's that part of like the awareness of your nervous system, because what I could consider overstimulating, my husband might not. And that shows up
Mm.
a lot, right? Like whether it's a coworker, a partner, a parent, it doesn't really matter. But when that happens, you will flip your lid and you literally lose your thinking brain. And I think what has happened to me there and many of my clients will go with parenting as an example.
Yeah.
You are listening to, let's say, Dr. Becky. And I think Dr. Becky is a wonderful parenting guide, but it's a lot of cognitive work. Or you've read that parenting book. You've gone to therapy sessions, you've done the thinking, and then you get in the moment and
Yeah.
your nervous system gets flooded and your thinking brain goes offline. And so you continue sort of down the same path that you're probably looking to shift. And then afterwards, you're left feeling guilty. Like,
Right.
gosh, I know better. And you're not wrong. You do know better, but you're also, it's just your nervous system running a track. And the more you can like step into that and see that, and the more you can be in communication with your nervous system, you can catch it before that flipping the lid moment. And that changes everything. Um, and I gave
Yeah.
an example of parenting mostly because I have three young children. So this is like very top of mind for me.
Sure.
But this shows up too, like let's say you go to give a big presentation, or you are in, you're in a leadership position and you are trying to delegate or lead several people in your company, right? Like this co-regulation piece and this loss of your thinking brain can happen in any capacity.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And you said it so well. Like people that are experiencing that, or when we experience it, we don't love being that way. And I joke with folks I talk with a lot, like a lot of us think we can somehow avoid this, right? We're above it. We've evolved past it. I'm like, put yourself in traffic, and I bet you internally you've dropped some expletives, right? If someone cut you off or did a
Oh,
driving thing, right? We all can have triggers about driving. I don't want to trigger people on the podcast, but just
yeah.
as a reminder, like none of us are free of that. And while seeking composure and all that's great, this is a normal human
Yes,
behavior pattern. Now we can do something about it. We don't have to stay stuck there and suffering, but
exactly.
this occurs
And
for everyone.
yeah, and so it's actually really healthy for it to happen. You want your nervous system to be like a rubber band. It can expand out into fight,
Mm,
flight, or potentially into freeze, but then it
mm,
can come back. I think for um before, I mean, I did this work for a long time before I realized that I too have a nervous system, and that was a big turning point for me. But
right.
with this framework and this self-awareness and then knowing what tool to grab for, you sort of stay in that overstretched place. And that's when it starts to feel like, gosh, well, just one little thing happens and I lose my mind, right? And what's
Right.
wrong with me? Why am I like this? You've probably just chronically been in fight flight. So while
Yeah.
fight, flight, or freeze or any of it is normal, you do want to have a pathway back so you can go up and down, up and down, up and down. That's a healthy nervous system. A lot of what you see out there is let's be calm. Calm is
Right.
great, but nobody's calm 24/7. Like to me, that's not the goal. I think composure is great. I also think authentically shifting gears is really, that's to me regulation. Like, can I
Sure.
authentically go up and down? Even today, I came on this call and I was like, hey, we had a change of plans and I am sitting in my son's bedroom. Is that okay? Right? But
Yeah.
my nervous system supports me in doing that. If I was perpetually stuck in fight flight, I might be
Mm,
sweating. I might be more nervous. I probably would have argued with my husband about this change of plans, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Instead, I can be like, oh, didn't go as planned, but I'm able to pivot. And that's, I don't know. To me, that's one of the biggest gifts of knowing about this.
No, 100%. And you said it so well. I think the other for folks observing this is it can be normal in the workplace and also at home too, there's this undesirable behavior that happened. And we can get super high focused on Chris had a blow up, right, during this meeting, and it was frustrating and it was frightening. We could also get curious, like, I wonder why Chris blew up.
Yes.
Like, what's behind this behavior? Because we
Yep.
can't really change behavior. Everyone's tried to, and it's surprise, surprise, we can't.
Yep.
But what's behind it? Like in the work situation, maybe there's some like frustration and he's got an idea that no one's hearing and can move it forward, not that that's ever happened to me, but you know,
Hypothetically.
but at home for sure, um, what's behind that stuff? And it might be more than just my cup's full and I'm
Yeah.
done. There's some stuff to work on and build
Yep.
skills around, right?
Absolutely. So I love zooming out is what I call it.
Okay.
Sort of like, so the undesirable behavior happens in whatever domain. And I often in the moment don't do this because in the moment you're still in that nervous system pattern. But later,
Right.
generally when I'm trying to fall asleep, I'm like, what was that? Like what happened? Right. And so then I'll zoom out and I'll look at what's been asked of me in a week, what I've done. I call them nervous system deposits, but the things I've done to take care of my nervous system, often when
Mm,
we hit this place of it not going the way I wanted, those things haven't happened. And that's not because I'm doing it wrong or I always need an hour a day to take care of myself. It's just like life being life. I run a business.
yeah,
I have three young kids. Like there's many points in life where I'm like, oh yeah, we're just not getting to it kind of thing. Um,
sure.
that takes away the guilt and gives me the reason, like this is the reason why it happened. And it's okay. I can try to plan better next time. I can try to recover my nervous system so that I don't go into the next day and the next day still like in that heightened state. Um,
Hmm.
and then I think it's really important when appropriate, and I think it's most often appropriate, to show people what the repair looks like. So a lot of times it's like we have the blow up and
Right.
then we circle back and we're like, I'm sorry. Or potentially we pretend it didn't happen. But there's like the blow up and then this new person shows up and no one really talks about like, what'd you do in the middle there, right? Like
Right.
actually, I think it's equal with kids and with employees, right? To go back in or coworkers and say like, hey, this happened, right? So with my kids, it sounds like I'm having a really hard time not losing my temper. I'm gonna go do some wall pushes and put the ice roller on the back of my neck, because I really don't want to yell. I'm really trying not to
Yeah.
do.
Right.
Um, I'm never blaming the other person, but just showing them like this is where my nervous system is and this is what I have to do about it. And I
Nice.
think that creates connection and it shows people like there is space for you to get dysregulated and you're not a horrible, awful human. Like we all do
Yeah.
it. And here's how we find our way back. In the workplace, it would sound a little bit different. But I still think it's an important step.
No, 100%. I mean, you said it well too. I think there is a lot of overlap. My belief is there's a lot of overlap between parenting styles and leadership styles.
Yes.
Generally, they come from our family of origin, and generally, we don't question them and we don't like them being questioned.
Yes.
But we can have blind spots about the nervous system stuff, especially
Yeah.
we make it about behavior.
Yep.
I'm curious, you said so well about kind of leading ourselves and our
Yes.
own regulatory system, but are there things we can do to lead our tribe, our kids, folks around us, folks we work with, or folks that work for us?
Absolutely. So the science is abundantly clear that one, we co-regulate and we co-dysregulate.
Mm,
People love talking about co-regulation. I feel like they're often putting this responsibility on typically the adult or the leader, and you're
mm.
supposed to like have this magic power where you can regulate everyone's nervous system around you, and yet you yourself never need anyone to co-regulate too. It's a lie, right?
Right.
I help many, many people co-regulate in a week. And I have people who help me co-regulate because we are not wired to do this
Yeah.
totally on our own. So I think just being aware of that is the first piece. And then
Nice.
from there, the science is also clear that when you are co-dysregulating, right? So you walk into an environment, whether you are walking in as the leader or walking in as the employee or the coworker or whatever the case may be, um, you can co-dysregulate. And the way
Mm,
to not do that is to come back to your own nervous system. Something as simple as like I will tap my fingers, my thumb to my fingertips, just to sort of be like, this is your body. Whatever's
mm.
happening out there, mirror neurons, they want They're trying to keep you safe and alive. If we were
Right.
animals out in a field and every animal around us started booking it, you should probably run. There's something coming, right? So
Right.
this is sort of like why we do that. But I don't need to do that when I get onto a group Zoom call, right? And it can happen
Right.
virtually. It definitely happens when you're in the room with someone. So I think being really aware of your own nervous system state and just what's happening, right? Like, am I co-dysregulating? And I still do it all the time. This is like a funny story, but around the holidays, I was parked in front of my daughter's preschool. I had extra time. How I got there early is like a wild history
It's a
in life.
miracle.
There I was, yeah. And so I wasn't planning on getting out of the car. It was cold out. We were happily listening to music. Everything was fine. And then the person in front of me opened their car door. And do you know what my brain did immediately? I opened the car door because it was like,
Mm.
oh, it must be time to go.
Mm.
That is mirror neurons, right? Nobody's doing anything wrong. It's just nervous systems running, but this is happening kind of all of the time. Yeah, so I think awareness of it, coming back into your own body, and then if you are in a position of leadership, I call it the most dysregulated person wins because they're going to win anyway, right? So
Ah.
I worked in public schools for a long time and so much love for teachers. It is very hard to stay in
Yes.
front of a room of 25 not fully developed brains who don't have all their self-regulation skills and
Hmm.
both teach and stay regulated. And many times, I would hear about the student who wasn't doing this well. That's what they were coming to me for. And so I would give some nervous system suggestions called sensory processing in that domain.
Hmm.
And I would say, I don't have time for that. And I'd like, I so get it. You don't have time for it. But let me tell you what's going to happen. You can take 5 minutes on the front end, or you can take 25 minutes during circle time. You get to
Right.
choose. But we know that this child needs this kind of support. So I
100%.
think about this all the time when I'm with my kids and even in group dynamics, right? If someone is really dysregulated and you feel like it's impacting the room, that nervous system wins because
Yeah.
it's going to anyway, right? It's the person who maybe potentially, is interrupting or is doing some like deep breathing or maybe like shuffling their papers and slamming them. You can sort of tell,
Hmm.
you can disagree and still be regulated, but you can tell when dysregulation is showing up. And I would address it sort of head on.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. And I love you brought up the, animals in the field and booking it. It's we can get judgy about ourselves, like this thing shouldn't have this level of trauma. But really, as I understand it, our nervous system doesn't care. It has a chemical reaction, electrical reaction that this is a fight, flight, freeze event to carry it to the extreme. And I'm
Yep,
going to pump adrenaline and cortisol and I'm going to shut everything off because I have an old program that tells me
exactly.
this is going on. And yes, it might be faulty and it's not judging the situation as others would, but it doesn't matter to that person.
Doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
I very deeply love the brain and the nervous system, as I'm sure you can tell.
Yeah.
The brain is trying to be efficient, right? So it's trying to be like, oh, when X happens, we do Y over and over and over again. So you don't have to come up with a new plan every time a new stimulus is presented.
Got
But
it.
sometimes the brain gets it wrong. And that's not bad unless you're not aware of it, right? So
Mm.
even like I am in New Jersey and I used to work in Fort Lee, which is right outside the George Washington Bridge. And I give that nugget before the story because it's about driving. There's a lot of traffic in this part of
Okay.
the world, especially as you approach the George Washington Bridge at like 8 a.m. on a weekday. So I
Mm.
come up to the stop sign. No, there's not a stop sign. There should be. It's an intersection where there's like three different places coming.
Hmm.
It's wild, right? I always stop. And from behind, like these two SUVs fly by me, and there are other cars coming, and nobody gets into an accident. I definitely had a fight flight response that probably involved a particular finger and certain words. And
Yes.
so, whatever, I continue on my drive, my day goes on. I drive this route every single day at this point in time. The
Mm.
next time I pull up to that intersection, my hands on the steering wheel clench so, so hard, right? My nervous
Sure.
system is going, this is the same time of day, this is the same place, and it wasn't safe last time.
Yeah.
The difference for me is that I have an awareness of it. So I can be like, oh, I see you. We're actually good right now. Like, thank you. It's okay. But if
Yeah.
you don't have that awareness, your autopilots are doing that all of the time, and you're like steadily climbing the fight flight mountain, and you don't even know it's happening. And then
Right.
you think, oh, this one small thing happened and I lost my temper. But really, this was mounting from earlier on. So your nervous system's always recording and it's trying to automate stuff for you. And that's really, really good. But we just want
Hmm.
to sort of be a part of this process, so we don't get stuck in autopilots that aren't serving us.
Right. No, 100%. And then, where we can serve others, I mean, obviously you want to be careful about, hey, you look dysregulated, let me fix you. That's
Yes,
probably not the right energy to approach it because
yes,
I know my threat responses would go off and I might use
yes.
the same middle finger you just talked about,
Uh-huh.
at least
Yeah.
internally,
Oh, yeah.
right? But it sounds like there are things nonverbal we can even do to help
Yes.
calm a situation or co-regulate.
Yep. So some things that I pay attention to are many times when somebody is dysregulated, more words is not the best choice, right?
Mm,
And I don't want to make a blanket statement because everyone's unique, but I think this one is pretty applicable across the board. Um, so even just looking at someone and your first thought might be like, you're being a jerk or some other version of that.
sure.
Then usually my next thought is what's happening back there, right? Like, oh, okay, there might be something going on. I tend to take a step back at that moment, especially if it's a nervous system I don't know well, right? Like if it's my husband, I know his nervous system very well. He actually does need space and quiet, but I know that to be true. If I don't
Mm,
know what someone else may or may not need, I'm just going to stop dropping stimulus if I can, right? There's definitely scenarios where you can't always, but I think sort of stepping back and just observing. A question that I often ask myself is what's too much, what's not enough, and what can I do about it, right? The what's too much could be like all of the lights are on, the room is really hot, people are talking over each other, there's a million visuals up on the board, right? Like these are all things that could be dysregulating. So I would quickly scan the environment and just sort of take in like how much is happening out here.
yeah.
What's enough? Have people had a break? Have they had a chance to go to the bathroom, get a sip of water, walk around? Um, does each person feel like they're having an opportunity to speak, right? Like that's the what's not enough. And then what can I do about it? I add that question in because sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, right? Like depending upon the scenario, it just that's the situation you're in. And that's when the awareness piece is so powerful.
Mm,
Um, and I know that a nervous system also likes a plan. So let's say I'm dysregulated and I'm in a situation where there's nothing I can do about it. It's just like, here we are. I will literally say, like, I see you. Yep, we later on, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z because I know that helps my nervous system. But
yeah.
like right now, we're just here. And it's a tool called attend and befriend in like the somatic world. And it
Yeah.
really just gets your nervous system to stop sending the smoke signal up of like, we've got a problem. You're not listening. I'm gonna make this message a little bit louder, right? It just um, allows your nervous system to be like, oh, they finally got the message. And so the dysregulation is still present, but it's not like a fire alarm in your body to the same
Ah,
extent.
nice. I love that. That's a great talk too, because it very much is, if you think about a disaster and all the resources of first responders that come, that's sort of the same energy, right? That's happening in the brain. There's the equivalent of fire trucks and ambulances and all this height-end stuff. And, it might not be something that needs that attention, but our nervous system doesn't care.
Doesn't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah,
It's
it's
doing its job.
exactly just doing its job. Exactly.
Right. Jessica, this is so powerful, I think, for people because we can get stuck as parents or as leaders or as commuters, whatever that is.
Yes.
And, what you share and teach and coach about really gives, I don't want to say a path out. It's really a path in to deal with what folks are dealing with in a way that they might not even be thinking about. And it's, you don't have to sit in suffering on a counseling bench for a decade.
Nope. You
Trying
don't.
not to cut down counselors, sorry, but there's
Yeah.
some people that just keep you in suffering. You don't help you move out, right?
Yeah.
There's some practical things based on our physiology,
Yes.
that we can do. And so I'm curious for folks listening to this, they're really interested. Like, I want to work with Jessica. How do they do that?
Yeah. So I think two best places to find me are either my website or Instagram. And I believe that you have those links and they'll be out and about. They're super creative. It's my full name because that's the best I got.
Perfect.
And then the way I work with people, so I definitely offer one-to-one support in a few different like varieties, depending upon what feels good for everyone's nervous system, right? And then I also offer a training program for people who want this personally, and they also want to be able to take it with them, whether it is in a therapeutic capacity or in a professional capacity, but they want to be able to really deeply understand the science of the nervous
Mm,
system. And this started because a year into business, more than half of my clients were mental health counselors. And I was
interesting.
sort of like, that's an interesting
Yeah.
phenomenon. I did not seek these people out. And what they sort of said is, we know the coping skills. We value self-care, right? We teach this. It is our profession.
Sure.
And then when we go home, we're carrying the weight
Mm,
of, everyone that we spoke to.
yeah.
It can happen no matter what realm you work in. And we're not able to put into practice like all the things we know in our own homes. And it's a problem.
Yeah.
And the missing piece was the nervous system. And once they figured out how to do it for them, the very next question they all had was like, I want to take this to my clients, right? I want to take this to my workplace because it
Yeah.
moved the needle for me. And so I obviously want to give that back out. So quite by accident, a practitioner program came to be. Yeah, so those are the two ways that I support people. And I just like love to get on a call and talk it through. And then we find what fits best for you, your lifestyle, and your nervous system.
Love it. Love it. So awesome and so useful and so needed. Really excited for folks that are going to connect and make that next step. You're worth it. You're entirely worth it as a human,
Thank you.
and you don't need to stay in suffering or be triggered even by traffic
Yes, yes,
any longer.
yes. It'd be so much easier. Like the traffic will be there, but it could be so much easier.
Yeah. But Jessica, I ask every guest at the end of the podcast before we wrap up is what's one thing you're grateful or thankful for?
Ah, one thing, there's so many things. I am really grateful. I want to say both for my family and then I want to say for my nervous system, which is like not meant to be super cheese, but before I understood this for myself, things did feel hard, right? I was going to a job that wasn't my favorite in the world. I was sitting in a lot of traffic. And then I was coming home and feeling like I had nothing left for my family.
Mm,
And that sucked. That entirely sucked. I have no other way to say it.
yeah.
Um, and now I still get stressed out. Like I'm a human living a real human
Hmm.
life. But the amount I'm able to be present, the amount that I'm able to like have fun and play, which was literally not part of my nervous system prior to,
Mm,
um, I'm just grateful that I figured it out when I did because I do have young kids and I have a very new business. And I feel like, gosh, what a relief that I know this now instead of like waiting 2 more decades, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's my answer.
That's awesome. It's awesome. I love it. Jessica, thank you so much for being on Leading the Way. And listeners, thank you so much for being here as well. Hope you got a ton out of this as I did. And be sure to subscribe and like and do all those magical things so you can enjoy other awesome guests and make sure that you see them and listen to them. And just take good care of yourself. Love to all of you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Leading the Way podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss other great episodes like this one. And if you're ready for more in your workplace, be sure to go to aintent.com. You'll find lots of free tools, assessments, and ways to engage directly with us to get your own epic results. We'll see you there.